You're one of the most prolific thread writers on Twitter, but I want to know who are Trom, Caden, Shyman, and Akira, and how have they played a role in your journey as a writer?
Wow. So you do your homework. I love this. So Trom, Caden, Shyman, and Akira. The interesting part, there's another character in that book named Trip, and I named two of the characters after my sons. So ultimately, when we hire an agent and start working through the publishing process, they may change those names, but two of the characters in that book that you're talking about are named after my children. And if we rewind the clock, about 7 years ago, when I was, maybe it was a decade ago, Greg, wow, time flies. I finished the book 3 or 4 years ago, and we've left getting an agent and getting published to the side. But what that is you're talking about a fantasy series that I wrote or started to write with my sister. So we've now finished book one, Emerging from the Shadows, book one of the Elementium Chronicles, and intending to be a 4 or 5 part fantasy series. And most of the people on Twitter know me for writing about self improvement, business, how to make money. I simplify psychology, success, and money. In the past, when I probably read 500 plus fantasy books. And so that was always my jam. And so what that series is a fantasy series. But the fun part is it incorporates a lot of what I write about on Twitter. So mental health, we talk about capitalism, socialism, different political systems, and we created our own magical system. It's just a fun series, and I write it with my sister. So I have the ideas, I create the world, and I'll send her a chapter, and then Greg, she turns it into magic.
That's amazing. I had a company with my brother when I first moved out to LA. We worked together. It was interesting. Looking back, I think it was more of a bonding exercise because from a business perspective, it just didn't work. It kind of fell right on its face right as we started. But that's so awesome that you get to do that with your sister. You started your Twitter account in, I guess, 2018, right? And I've heard you talk about how you joined a bunch of different communities. You did Art of Purpose and you did Ship 30 for 30 with Dickie and Cole. You did Sahil Bloom's community, and you learned something different in every one, and it kind of helped you along as you were getting started and trying to get your footing. Can you talk about the importance of skill stacking, especially when it comes to being a new creator and being part of these different communities and how that helped?
Yeah, so when I started in 2018, that was an old account. So one of the biggest regrets I have is not restarting a new account when I started to take Twitter seriously, because that was only 2 years ago, Greg, August 2021. I said, I'm going to write for the next 1 year every day on this platform. I'm going to take some courses and I'm going to learn. So I jumped into Masterclass 24/7. That November, I took Create, Publish, Profit. In the following spring, I took Ship 30 for 30. And I took around the same time as Ship 30 for 30, I did audience building with Sahil Bloom. And taking that to skill stacking is the most important thing you can do in your life. And so, what we're talking about there is picking up as many different skills as we can and combining them in a way that differentiates us from the crowd. I like to talk about that as rare skills, Greg. And so what I look at is by background and training, I'm an accountant or a finance person, I'm a CFO. And so you would look at me and say, well, this is what I would expect from an accountant, from a CFO. But I've invested very heavily in learning emotional intelligence, in learning how to write, how to speak publicly, how to host a podcast, how to interview and ask questions. These are all skills that you generally don't see in a CFO. And so when you're able to combine all of those, you start to stand out from the crowd. I think it's easy to become the top 10% in any one of those, but it's very hard to get to the 1% or the 0.01%. But if we can take 8 different things and we can be in the top 10% in all of them, and then we merge them, now we're in the top 0.01% because there aren't people like us. And so when it comes to how you use that as a creator, you stand out from the rest of the crowd because you're also not only talking about that skill, but you're talking about it ideally from a place of lived experience. And you see a lot of people who say, like, who are these clown 20-year-olds who are telling me about how to be productive in my life when they are still living at home in their mom's basement? So you take the skills, you practice them in the real world, you combine them in a way that makes them rare, and then you write about it. And when you do that, you really stand out from the rest of the crowd.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was listening to a quote from Robert Greene yesterday that came across my feed, and it was like, some people were agreeing with it, some people weren't, but they were talking about in your 20s, you should just be, kind of blending in almost, and just learning skills, learning how the corporate world works, like doing your job, like seeing how people in the top echelon of your company interact, like just kind of picking up things along the way and just learning and learning, and then eventually when you get closer to 30, then you can kind of like just explode. And some people were like, no, you need to be taking risks the whole time, and some people understood it. But there is something there, whether or not you're putting yourself out there or not. I think learning consistently and stacking those things, to your point, like becoming a unique variation of a learner, is really important, and it's going to allow you to make your own mark. And you're obviously a lifelong learner, and something that's incredible about you, I think, is your podcast, where you read a book a week and then you interview the author of that book for your show. And so, like, just there's no way to slack off in that kind of cadence, and you're just constantly learning new things and then exploring that topic with the author. I can't even imagine like the compounding effect. How important do you think it is to have a podcast, and what do you think it can do for personal brands?
Massive. And let's dive really deep on that one. I do think that in your even teens now to your early 20s, that there's a very big power in establishing your brand and establishing your reputation. So there are two schools of thought. You talked about the idea of blending in and learning from people while being part of the crowd. There's definitely a power to that because you could get access to people that you'll learn tremendous things from. So for example, I've worked for people that I think they probably are a billionaire at this stage of their life. And what I learned from them about real estate was massive. And then I was able to apply that on my own scale. Would I have had access to them if I just went straight to taking risks and building my own business? Maybe not. And so there's a benefit to doing that. Now, how do you do that while taking certain risks so that you're building something of your own? I think creating your own brand and creating your own, let's call it becoming a creator, allows you to take some of those risks while still learning from people while you build a career. And there's a power to building that career because then you can eventually talk about it again, going back earlier to lived experience. How does a podcast tie into that? One, you're interviewing me, and similarly to how I interview other people, one of the biggest skill sets you develop from that is better listening skills. You also develop better conversational skills. So you're able to really dig in when you're at that dinner party and start asking people questions. In the number one way we know from How to Win Friends and Influence People, though a lot of people hate the book, you and I both, I would think, probably love it. The number one way to be interesting is to be interested. The number one way to demonstrate that you're interested is to ask good questions, not surface level, not, hey, how's the weather? Hey, what do you like to do in your spare time? But really to dig deep into what's something that no one else in this room knows you for that you love to do, right? Really digging into the meat and getting into those fun questions so you have that engaging conversation. That's really going to move you forward in life. The other thing that's going to happen is when people listen to you on a podcast, they feel like they're in relationship with you. That could be 45, 60, 90 minutes of you in their ear having a conversation with them. So when they hear you asking great questions, Greg, and engaging in good conversation with the people that you're bringing on your podcast, they're building their relationship with you and you don't even know them. Eventually you could have hundreds of thousands of people who have listened to you for hours and hours. And I think that's a power not enough people take advantage of.
Yeah, it's a bit of a high barrier to entry. In a way, I guess if you're just doing audio and you're just recording phone calls, it's not that hard. But there's just still a lot of elements to it to do it well. And a lot of people start podcasts and then they kind of fall off because the traction isn't it just doesn't come right away with the views and with the recognition. And but I think if you are able to stick with it, you make a great point about being in someone's ear for that long and having those just countless hours of connection with you, where you can have this one to many kind of connection with people that's really deep, and you can sell off of that. You can do a lot of things with that because you build trust, and you're giving away so many ideas and you're bringing out of other people, and there's just so much value in listening to people talk in this long form. And you are a great long form writer on Twitter. You're kind of basically the king of writing viral threads at this point. I'm curious, what are the keys to writing a great thread? What is your process? And do you have any tips for newer creators that want to get started writing them?
Tips for new creators is to write. So the number one thing for anything is what you want to do or what you want to be, do it. So if you want to be a runner, run. If you want to be a creator, create. If you want to be a writer, write. So how did I become a good thread writer? I made a decision that I would write a thread every day for a certain period of time. It ended up being around 75 days, Greg. It got to the point where writing threads was easier for me than writing tweets because I had written so many of them that my brain, my writing muscle, became a thread muscle. So when I go to write a tweet, it's a little bit harder for me because I stopped writing tweets. I only wrote threads for almost 3 months. And then for the next 6 months, I think I wrote 4 to 5 threads a week. And so I kept that up for about 6 to 9 months. And that allowed it to become reasonably easier to write threads. How do you make it so that the thread goes viral? There's a few important elements. You have to look at 3 different things. One, is the content relevant? Is it good content? No matter how you package it, no matter how you distribute it, if it's shit writing, it's not going anywhere. So number 1, is there meat on the bone? Number 2, how have you presented it? How does it read? How is it packaged? Does it look good? Is it visually appealing? Is there enough white space? Is it something that stops the scroll? Are you catching someone with your hook? Remember, as Nicholas Cole likes to say, it's not clickbait if you deliver what you promise after the fold. So you want to stop the scroll. You want to have some powerful concepts, and we could talk about what some of those look like. You want to have some powerful concepts to stop the scroll. And then the last thing, what's your distribution network? Have you built relationships on the platform so that when you share content, your friends share it? When they share content, you share it. And if you have those right relationships and you've built a relationship with your audience, when you've done all of that, you've written content that adds value to people's lives, you've presented it in a way that looks good, reads good, skimmable, smooth, and you've got your distribution network, you're going to go viral reasonably consistently.
Yo, guys, real quick, if you're enjoying the Louder podcast, you're going to love Louder Spaces. My partner Virgil and I are hosting Twitter Spaces rooms 3 times a week. And what we've done is create a real audio experience. We bring in influential guests. We use custom audio intros, bring in outside clips, and we have guests react. And we have what's called Amplify, where we bring up audience members and we all share the love by liking, commenting, retweeting their content, and getting them tons of exposure. You could be the next person we blow up. Just come by Louder Spaces on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Follow me on Twitter at GregLunt27. See you there. I want to touch on the distribution network side of things because I think it's really underrated and it's not a lot of people fully understand how it works. And you have 350,000 followers. I think you have about 200,000 of those have come in the last year. And you have groups of people that I see you trading retweets with other large creators. I'm curious, can you walk us through like how that works, if you recommend it, and some of the biggest levers that you've been able to pull to go viral and grow?
Yeah, so how it generally works is you build relationships with people. And so when you start small. And I think you know Curtis Haney. You may have come across Curtis's work. Like Curtis and I have been in probably half a dozen to a dozen groups together over the last 2 years. And he and I found each other when we had 1,000 or less followers, Greg. And we've become very good friends. We've done some business projects together. We've met up at a couple mastermind type events. We're meeting this weekend in Los Angeles with Brian O'Connor and a couple other creators on Twitter and entrepreneurs in a leveling up founders mastermind. But it's a chance to get to know each other as creators and as people off platform. Like you and I, we jumped on. I mean, this is how you do it. You and I jumped on a Zoom call and had a chat for an hour while I was out for a walk. We talked about what you're doing, what I'm doing. So you do that with people who are similar size accounts and you say, hey, I resonate with you. I resonate with your content. I think you resonate with mine. Why don't we hit each other up? So let's create a Telegram channel or a Discord channel. Those tend to be the most popular. WhatsApp is probably number 3. A little harder to work VAs or helpers in because a lot of people do that. And what we say is when you drop your content in the morning, Greg, throw it into our channel and I'll hit it. So I'll like it, comment on it, and retweet it. And then as the accounts get larger, you may retweet less. You may only like and comment because some people have you on notifications. So there's benefit enough in doing that. So then when you drop it in the channel and I engage with it because bottom line, you're my friend. I like your content. You're just giving me a heads up that you've dropped it. And I'm like, oh, Greg dropped something. I'm going to go look at it. I'm going to go hit it. I'm going to engage with it because Greg's my friend. I want to share his content. And then when I drop something, I'm going to give you a heads up. Greg just dropped a thread. Do you mind hitting it? And if you're doing that with 10 to 12 other like-sized accounts, you're getting in front of more eyeballs. And the algorithm saying, hey, people are liking this content. If you drop a thread, I'm going to like each tweet in your thread. I'm going to drop a comment and then you're going to engage back with it. And that's telling the algorithm, hey, people like Greg's content. They're engaging with it. They're not only liking the lead thread, they're reading the thread and they're liking everything along the way. Let's pump Greg up for other people.
You know what's crazy is some people, and even when I started my journey, what's interesting, I think I had done everything completely organically, and I kind of like looked with a side eye at like, oh, it's like cheating to like have like engagement groups and stuff. And then as I've just become more like accustomed to the platform, I kind of pivoted off of, the niche I was in. It's almost cheating like in itself, how engaged like certain like crypto people are and stuff like that. That's where I was at. And it's like you get into the real world or the real Twitter, I guess, the money Twitter space and stuff like that, the productivity Twitter. And it's like, it's based on merit a lot more than just like people being like a fanboy of a token or something like that. And so you need to leverage everything you can. There's nothing wrong with a mutually beneficial exchange between friends to be like, hey, let's help each other. Like that's the whole game, right? Is to be social and to help each other grow. And for me, one of these things that I've really come across now for me to be able to leverage and to connect with friends and other people is spaces. And kind of we go in there, and that's a good way to share audiences as well. You have other creators that come on and you discuss things, and you trade followers and you share ideas and deepen connections. You've done a bunch of spaces, particularly with Curtis and Steve, that I've seen over the months. How are you looking at spaces right now in terms of your strategy? Are you incorporating them more or less? And what's your take on them overall?
Spaces are a great way to grow up until a certain size. I look at everything as return on investment and return on time. So spaces are great through 10,000. And I would say from 10,000 to about 25 to 50,000. And then unless you're able to consistently generate the type of room that gets 1,000 people in it or thousands of people in it over the hour. Unless you're able to generate that consistently, you start to lose your return on time. And someone we can look at for that is our friend Wolf. So Wolf is one of the top finance spaces hosts about 50 hours a week, Greg, if I'm not mistaken. And he regularly has hundreds, if not thousands of people coming into the room. But he wasn't growing well enough. It wasn't until we had a conversation and I told him that he needed to start writing threads and how he could come up with content for threads, because if you're hosting 50 plus hours of spaces a week, you've got some content to write about. And so when Wolf started posting threads, his growth went exponential. Now, it's not as if he wasn't growing, but he just supercharged it. And so I found that once I crossed a certain size, the amount of follows that I would get in a space didn't merit the 1 to 2 hours to do that space, because in that time I could write 5 threads. And if those threads went viral, the amount of followers I would pick up would be 5 times what I would get in the space. So I just started to do the math and say the number one way I can grow on Twitter is through my writing, not through spaces, unless I was willing to devote significantly more time and become a top 1% spaces host on a topic that really drew people in, week out.
Okay, so
What have you seen in your growth journey?
no, this is really interesting for me. What I'm starting to think now is that, as you mentioned, there's kind of this inflection point where when you're smaller, even if you have those engagement groups of people that are around your size, if you're writing threads, they're way more hit or miss because you're not guaranteeing distribution. Your writing's probably not great because you're just starting out. We all suck in the beginning, kind of thing. And maybe spaces are an easy way to have other people come in and share their audience and share your ideas and get content for your threads, like you said. And then once you hit whatever number that is, let's call it 50,000 followers, it starts to become like, well, do I want to invest this time in writing and have my other 50,000 K friends pump it? Or do I want to spend an hour or two talking and maybe get 20 or 30 followers? It's probably guaranteed that I'm going to get those, but the upside maybe isn't there. And it becomes maybe more of a brand building exercise. I do think there is some value in if you're just starting an email list, no matter what size you're at. I think Spaces is a good way to do that. People don't use the nest well enough up at the top, pinning tweets to kind of push people to free platforms to move them off Twitter. I think it's kind of hard to sell in there at the moment, like directly, but I think you can push them to an email list. You can push them to a free Discord, things like that. And then you can sell them off platform. I'm curious from like a monetization perspective. I see you haven't turned on subscriptions yet. Are you thinking about that? Have you looked at this Xcoin stuff? How are you thinking about monetizing Twitter? I imagine that like there are ads that are getting placed within your threads. Were you a beneficiary of that payout from Elon recently? What does monetization look like for you?
So I haven't been a beneficiary yet because I'm a Canadian. So they only turned that on this month. So I think I got in probably the first couple days as a Canadian last week. So I kept saying like, "Hey, when's this coming to Canada?" And someone posted, and I just popped the monetization open, and it was there, and that was only last week. So this month will be the first time I'm eligible. So we'll see what happens there. Then there's opportunities for sponsorships. You may have a brand that says, "Hey, can you tweet about our product once a month for $1,500?" And so you do that and you write something about it. What people don't realize is a lot of people that write these 20 Chrome extensions so illegal that I shouldn't even be writing about them. 3 or 4 of those extensions are paid. So they're going out and saying, "Hey, barely.ai, I'm going to write a post on Chrome extensions. Do you want to be in my top 4 spots? It's $250. It's $500 to get in there." And they'll do that with 4 of the brands. And so now that post is a $2,000 tweet that they've made money on. So there's lots of intricate ways to make a few dollars. What I look at long term for monetization is more in line with someone like Nick Huber, who is building businesses that are tied to Twitter. So, a way to demonstrate excellence in your business ventures that you can then turn into potential investors, Greg. So, right now, I'm a full time employed CFO by day. At some point, I will be an entrepreneur. I will have my own businesses. And those businesses will be an opportunity eventually for other people to invest, whether that's private equity, whether that's real estate. Once I've established a track record, it will also give me more content to write about on my platforms. And so that's the way I look at monetization, is more of a long-term play.
Interesting. Okay. It's funny that you don't consider yourself an entrepreneur yet. You have so many things going on outside of your business, your day-to-day business. So, you're a full-time CFO at a real estate company, a large real estate company. I'm sure you're very busy with that. You manage a ton of personal real estate properties, right? You're a full-time dad, full-time husband. You're writing all these Twitter threads every week. You're reading a book a week. You're doing your podcast. You're getting 15K steps a day. I'm sure countless other things that we don't even know about. I'm curious, where do you find the time to become a prolific gamer? Word on the street is that you're top 100, or at one point top 100 in North America Clash Royale. Is that true?
Yeah, that's my guilty vice, is Clash Royale. So I that's like, everything's done for the day, or you're on the toilet, like you're like, all right, I'm gonna whip out some Clash Royale. This is how I'm gonna spend 5 minutes while I'm waiting in a line. So I started playing that game with my son when he was probably, my gosh, oh, it's so embarrassing. He was probably grade 4 or 5. Now he's going into grade 10. So I've been playing that game for like 6 or 7 years. So definitely a guilty pleasure. I've spent a fair amount of money. Uh, I don't know if I want to say how much, but more than my Starbucks coffee addiction for a few years, which people know I drink a lot of Starbucks, so pretty bad there, Greg. And then how I find time to do that is I eliminate almost everything else from life. Like, COVID was a great teacher. So a lot of people had lost their jobs, death, sickness. Like, but if you didn't have those things and you looked for the silver lining of COVID, the silver lining to me was it really showed us what prioritization and intentionality allowed you to achieve. And when you eliminated all the noise and said, what are those things I want to do in my life? Because now I have time. And so once you eliminated all that shit, it gave you the opportunity to really zone in on what you want to do, and you nailed it. It's my job as a CFO, being a husband, being a father, social media content, weekly newsletter that's now going out to 12,500 people. And we're about to start really supercharging that with the promotions and how we're going to leverage the sponsor network, Spark Loop. So that's going to go into overdrive, and then a weekly podcast. So those are the big things that occupy a lot of time. I may be starting a PhD program in September. So there's a couple other things that are not ready to be talked about yet, but are very big. And I'm making a decision. I shouldn't say may. I'm going to sign up tomorrow. So I've been accepted into the program. It'll be a PhD on the psychology of creativity, innovation, and leadership. So I want to work with creators, founders, and entrepreneurs. And that program, I think, will help me supercharge what I write about. And so over time, you'll see my brand evolve into the creative psychologist and
Wow.
focusing on the psychology of creativity.
Wow, that's incredible, man. Congratulations on being accepted. I can't wait to see what comes of that. And my brain automatically just goes to like, wow, that'll create so much extra content for you. But obviously
Yes.
it's a lot bigger than that. And I've heard you say, this goes right along with what you're talking about, which is like, you can throw out work-life balance, right? There is no balance in life. You said there's integration. And I thought that was a really
Yes.
interesting way to say it. And I've heard you say that, you have some sadness when you think back around maybe missing out on some time with your kids as you invest so much into providing for your family and going to work and doing all these amazing things. I'm curious, is there anything that you would have done differently looking back as far as that balance, or are you kind of like a no regrets guy?
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, there's regrets because when your kid's 9 years old and he looks at you and he stops saying "I love you" and you've said "I love you" to each other every day of your life, and he stops saying it and he stops looking you in the eye, and that to me, like, there's a sadness for me there that got to that stage. Now the youngest one, that never got there, because what you learn with your kids, Greg, is until they're about 8 or 9 years old, you're their hero simply for being dad. And then once they're about 8 or 9 years old, there actually becomes some quantitative nature to it. Like, hey, are you around? Are you a good dad? Do you do good things? Do I see you behaving in a way that I'm proud of? And so he lost that love or respect because I wasn't there. So that is hard not to regret as a father who loves his two boys immensely. And Greg, now he's 15 years old. That was 7 years ago. And so when he looks back, I hope that I've built that trust in that relationship with him, that he doesn't remember the dad who wasn't there. And I see him smile more. I see him laugh more. And I see the relationship that we have as a father and son, where he kicks my ass in basketball because he's already taller than me. He's a better basketball athlete. He's now, technically, I think he passed me in weight. So it's fun to have that relationship where we can play sports and be together. Do I wish I'd had that when I was younger? Yes, but I can't go back and change it. So I can't dwell on it. I can't live with a regret. All I can say is that happened. Sure, I wish it didn't, but it did. And that's what allowed me to become a CFO. That's what allowed me to earn a certain amount of money, to get the rental properties that we did, to set our family up for success for the rest of our lives. So, yes, definite regret that that happened. And I recognize the benefit we got from it. And I've made a very significant effort to be very involved in the life of him and his brother since then, whether that's being an assistant coach in some of their basketball teams, whether that's being an assistant coach or a head coach for my youngest son's hockey teams. So for the past 3 seasons, I've been head coach twice and assistant coach once. And that has well, I guess the season before that, I was also an assistant coach. So for the last 4 years, I've been a coach on his hockey teams. He's only been playing hockey for 4 years. So that ability to be there and be part of it has been beautiful. And it makes it challenging to also do all the other things that we're talking about, but it has to be a priority. My sons have to be a priority in my life.
Yeah, I think, you're obviously being a little bit hard on yourself because you're such a hard worker, and a lot of us are perfectionists and we want everything, why couldn't I just want it to be, this is great and this is great and I can manage all these things, and you're not perfect, but here's the thing, man, is like your son loves you no matter what. And it really doesn't take that much to win him back. And you've clearly won him back. Like if there was a lapse there, it's already back. And as he gets older, even though he's probably already forgot about it, as he gets older, he'll really understand. And don't forget, as he gets older, you'll also be ascending. And so it'll be like, wow, like I really get it now, like what it takes to be great. And so, you're setting a great example for your family. And I think you also set a good example for people that are working 9 to 5. They want to grow a personal brand, but they're nervous maybe about people that they work with or their boss finding out, whether that's out of job security or just insecurity. What
Mm-hmm.
advice could you give people that are on their creator journey, but are also working full time, and how to, massage that?
Yeah, there's a couple things we can do. One, they can create anonymously. So they can create a brand. You and I see them all the time. We've got the strip mall, the guys. We've got the strip mall guy. We've got the car dealership guy. We've got the, now Nick Huber's taken this a little too far, Nick, with the cost segregation guy, the SEO guy. I think he has 8 companies he's invested in, and he's had the person who's his operating partner become the guy in each one of those on Twitter. So you become a brand who's well known, who writes good content and builds a loyal audience, and you do it anonymously. That's one way. The other way is to be out in front about it and make sure it aligns with your job. Make sure it aligns with your career. So, for example, I always say to people in my engagement groups, Greg, I will not hit content that says rich this, broke that. Broke people are broke because A, I don't believe that. I don't want to engage with it, and it doesn't look good for work. Two, I won't generally hit content that shits on 9 to 5 jobs. Like, I work a 9 to 5 job. I'm not gonna, and I have 33 people on my team as a CFO on the finance team. I'm not going to shit on 9 to 5 jobs when I'm working one. And I have 33 people who work with me on my team because it's just not right. A, I don't believe it. B, it wouldn't look good as a CFO of a company to be hitting up and engaging with those posts. And so I draw certain barriers and limits on what I will and won't hit or what I will and won't engage with. And so I would say if people do that, if they approach it in a genuine, heart led way, and they don't shit talk their job and they're adding value. I mean, I met with a president of a local real estate company just last week, and he was saying that he's loving what he's seeing from my LinkedIn profile because he's learning a lot. And I'm not only sharing my content, I share content of other thought leaders. And he's saying it's helping him find thought leaders he can learn from. And he really appreciates that. So I think if you do it in a tasteful, intentional way, that it can add value to your business. And it's hard for an owner to or a boss to have an issue with that. But if you're taking shots at the 9 to 5, you're taking shots at your company, of course they're going to have an issue. If you're throwing out things that are politically insensitive, they're probably going to have an issue. So I think just be very intentional about what you are posting if you don't want to go anonymous. If you want to be anonymous, you can get a little scrappy around the edges. You don't have to be quite as afraid of what you're going to say. Now, at some point, you're probably going to want to let down the anonymity curtain, if you will. And if you said things that you don't want to stand behind as a non-anonymous person, just think about that before you write them anonymously.
Mm. I think about Legacy Builder. He is the ghostwriting guy to your point. And
Clifton, yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, he's come out now. He's given his first name, but this was a gradual thing where he was completely anonymous. Then he was like an AI photo of himself. Then he was a real photo of himself, and then as of yesterday, actually, he came out as Clifton. So he's got the first name out there. I'm sure it's only a matter of time before everything. But he was working the 9 to 5, and then he left his 9 to 5, and that's when he started to unfold everything. So you got to work hard behind the scenes and build that business. I know that's something you're doing. I'm really, I really admire you. I think that you've built something really cool. The balance that you do have, even though it's not the classic work-life balance because you don't believe in it, you do have a Zen balance to your life where you're able to manage all these different things. And it's something I look up to and I want to learn more about. I'm really grateful that you were on the show today. And I'd love you to just share with everybody any parting thoughts you have, where they can find you online, just a message that you want to leave.
Yeah, I think what I want everyone to know is there's always an opportunity to be a creator. There's always a space. Everybody thinks they need to be on step Z before they can start to talk to people about their journey. But you have to recognize that if you're on step C, there are people who are on steps A and B. So there are people that you can share your message with who can learn, develop, and grow, and who will appreciate you. If you want to continually up your game as a creator, then what you do is you continue to climb that ladder. You move from step C to D to E And eventually, someday, maybe you'll get to Z. And as you're climbing that ladder, you're writing about it, you're sharing about it. And so those people who were behind you on steps A and B, they can come along with you for that continuous journey. And along the way, you're going to pick up people who may have been ahead of you, but plateaued. Or you're going to pick up people who were on step D and they didn't know they were looking for someone like you until you started writing, and now you've evolved to step G or step H. And they're saying, oh, hey, there's this new guy, Greg, I found who writes about this or this or this. I want to go listen to him. I want to go read his writing. So start creating wherever you are. There are people behind you. Find something that you're fascinated about, learn about it, become an expert in it, and share it with the world. And you're going to build your own personal brand. And there will be so much upside to what that can mean for you later in life that you have no idea of today. But the opportunities that are out there for creators absolutely blow my mind, Greg. And you're well aware of it being in this space. Every, I'd say, 50,000 followers I picked up, the people I was having conversations with, and what I was learning was available or ahead of me on this journey continued to blow my mind, and it still does today.
Amazing, man. Look, congratulations on all your success. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're on vacation right now and you still cut out, an hour for me here. So I really appreciate it, Clint. Thank you for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, brother. It was a blast.